Alright guys, well, welcome back. So let's tear into this thing. So this is that Savage Anschutz Match 64 22 caliber rifle that we were talking about over on YouTube. And I actually purchased this thing off of Gun Broker of all places. And this guy was being sold as a gunsmith special. Who better to do it than a gunsmith? So I got it here in my gun shop. And between projects here, I should probably be building somebody a rifle, but today I'm doing this. So, as I mentioned, if you watch the YouTube video, a lot of the times these 22s end up getting just dirty and gunked up, and people don't clean them and maintain them like they're supposed to. It happens a lot of the times with semi-automatics really bad, and it even happens with these bolt-action rifles. Looking in here, it doesn't look that bad, but we're going to go through and clean all this stuff up and make sure we got everything we need and everything's the way it's supposed to be. So the very first thing I'm going to do, pull the trigger, that bolt comes out of there, and I'm going to move this back just a little bit. And as always, when I'm cleaning stuff, I try to get, although my bench is a complete mess, I try to keep all this stuff in a clean spot. These 64s and probably a lot of the other ones, there's just 2 screws, and of course when you're doing this, make sure to try and get the correct size screws for these guys. That's the right width, but I'm way too narrow, so here's, and as always, this is a Brownells set, Magnatip set. So these come out, here's the rear action screw on the back of the trigger guard. And the front action screw, that one's not even tight. And then this whole action comes out of here. So I'm gonna get my screws out of here so I don't lose those. And I'm gonna set this off to the side so we don't scratch that. And there we go. So now we're set up to start working or looking at the receiver here. So now I have this thing clamped in my vise, the barrel clamped in a vise, and I'm going to go through and look. As we can see in there, it's not that dirty in there. Here's my little pick. We got a little bit of gunk down in the bottom there, and then we go inside here in the extractor cutouts, and we can feel in there. There's really not a lot in there either. So that's a pretty good sign. These barrels are pinned on. The barrel is pressed in, and then there's a cross pin inside here. If you wanted to take that out, you could, but at this point there's really no reason to. I don't see a reason to. A lot of times you can get in here with Q-tips and just clean a lot of this stuff out and make sure that it's clean. And I don't really see that much stuff that really needs to be cleaned up in there. Even down here, sometimes, a lot of the times what happens is these extractor cuts get full of gunk. There's a little bit in there, but not enough that it would cause any issues. And as you can see, I'm being super careful with this, not scraping. You can very easily, of course, scratch stuff with these things. And even on this side, there's not really a lot in there. A little bit of gunk, but not anything that I would consider an issue. The lead buildup fouling creates an excess of headspace, and then the 22 shell won't seat in there. So I'm going to actually, do I have a test around here? I think I do. Probably one that's been fired on, but let's stick it in there and see if it fits. So it does fit in there. And it seats all the way up to the rim, so that's good. Let's pull that guy out of there. This is this little 22 shell here is a blank. You can buy these from Brownells. If you need to test cycling or even dropping the fire pin on them, that works really well. So let's check out the the inside here a little bit. Here's looking on the back side. So here's the ejector, and there's some gunk in there, but that's really not that bad either, and that shouldn't really cause any issues inside there, even though there's more gunk in there. But this is not, this is just cleaning any more than anything. Here's the bolt, and to take this thing apart, these Savage or the Anschutz bolts are kind of cool. So it's in the cocked position here, and this just turns and that comes apart. There's a little detent here. Yeah, don't lose your firing pin and spring. There's a little detent on there, and there's little detents on the back of this, so they just click back together like that. It's kind of a cool design, pretty simple, bayonet style. And here is our firing pin. And everything with that actually looks pretty good. It's not all gunked up. Look inside of our bolt here. I'll take this apart too, but usually what happens is this gets to be the problem. So there is a little shaving of brass on there. That shouldn't really matter, but you never know. Gunk on the bolt face. Clean this up. Okay. So next thing I probably want to do is, we got gunk in here too. That doesn't matter, it's just in the way. So I can see in here around the extractors there's some gunk in there. But again, nothing I would... There's quite a bit there. I think what I'm going to do is, in this right here, gunk in there. I'm going to take this extractor band off here, and we're going to take these extractors out of here. So this thing, I'll have to get a... So once you got it clipped over the extractor, you should just be able to push it off of there. So these guys are kind of stiff. So there has been issues where I've had these guys get kind of plugged up, where they don't move like they're supposed to. They are kind of gunky dirty. Get my other, push that one out. And these things are kind of greasy dirty. You can see that. And then that gives us good clearance to our bolt face and everything with our bolt. So what you can do with here is you can either stick this in an ultrasonic cleaner, or you can clean it by hand. So we're at the point now to where if cleaning all this stuff up and making sure it doesn't function properly, or making sure it does function properly, doesn't work, then we start to think about what else is going on here, as far as headspace and all that good stuff. To get the back half of this 64 bolt apart, first thing you got to do, have the front part on, decock it, so then this is loose, and we should be able to push left to right this pin out. Should, I say. Alright, so now I got this thing into the thing to hold it, and we're just gonna drive that pin out left to right. There's the pin. And of course I drop it. After you find your pin off the floor, this back shroud should just pull right off. And then this piece, I believe, pops out of there like that. And then carefully decock that, and your spring assembly comes out. And there's your stripped down bolt. So like I said, we're going to throw all this in the cleaner bath and then slap it all back together. Here's my cleaning bath. You can see I got some gunk in there, but that's just water. And I have this is a jar of acetone. And don't put anything but paint into acetone because it will destroy it. And then I just set it in here, let it run for a couple minutes. You can use whatever solvent you like, but acetone seems to work pretty well. I always vent it to make sure it doesn't build up any pressure, although acetone usually doesn't. See, it's destroying my plastic container. Probably should be in a metal container, but that's what I'm doing with it right now. So I'll just run this for maybe a minute or two, and it usually cleans up pretty much most of the gunk in there. All the oil, the grease, as long as it's not heavily caked on there, it should break it off. Most of the stuff that's on there now is just oil, a little bit of dirt and gunk, but this does a really good job of cleaning it. The one thing it also does a really good job is drying out all the metal, so if there is any spots that you want oiled or re-oiled, make sure to re-oil them because this will clean everything out. And it will also eat paint away. So if you have like a Browning shotgun trigger guard, that will eat the gold paint right off of that thing. Alright, so it's been a minute or two. So I'll go take this out and we'll continue. And there are our parts hot off the ultrasonic cleaner. And I'm going to blow just a few of these off to get everything out of there. This stuff, Winchester Gun Cleaner. It actually works pretty well. It's got Teflon in it and it's kind of spendy, but I actually never used this stuff, and then I was given a bunch of them for free and I was like, hey, this actually works really well. So it's a good lightweight oil and cleaner. If you want, I don't use it as a cleaner, but it's a good lightweight oil. And you still get some gunk on there even after you clean it. I didn't leave it in the ultrasonic very long, but we can measure the bolt face here. Let's do that. I'm going to measure the bolt face here and see what kind of a reading we get. So there's 0. So we are at 25, 35, 40, 39 thousandths. Maybe 40 thousandths. Yeah, just over 39 thousandths. So I'm just measuring from the the bolt nose to the face there. So that's pretty tight spec on bolt nose clearance as far as head space goes. So let's put this guy back together. See if I can remember how to put it back together. Alright, so these things can kind of be a pain to get back together. So what we're going to do here is, here's the front of our bolt with our firing pin and spring in there. Here's our main spring and our pin. So I'm just going to use this to push this back a little like that, and we're going to clamp it in a vise. So there it's retained back. And the thing we want to try and watch for here is there's a little flat spot on the front of this pin here. So you see this flat spot? The idea here is that we want to get our firing pin right on the side of that flat spot. This might be a problem right here. This thing might have been off or something, so it's not, but we'll try and get that lined up here. Put our pin back in. and we want to be right about there. So that's going to be pretty close. So I'm going to pull this out, make sure our pin is clamped in there really well. Pull this out, and getting it over that could cause you problems right there where it gets stuck right on that bolt. Otherwise you'll never get this front part on. So we want to make sure our flat spot is there. We're going to turn our bolt till it basically slides on. Oop. There we go. I did this a second ago, it worked flawlessly. Try it again here. There we go. Turn it, and there it's on. Okay, so now we can pull, or we can just release it and it doesn't even need to do anything. So there it's back together as far as that. And then getting this guy back on. So we put our little round piece in there, so the hole goes in first till it lines up, and then this guy should slide right in there, and this should be fairly flush, and you got to kind of turn until you see there's our pinhole right there. And we're gonna go make sure it's lined up where I want it to be. So we're gonna bend that. Not bend it, but push it over so we get our pin started. There we go. Pound it back into place. So there's our pin protrusion now, and to be honest with you, I didn't look at this beforehand. I should have. But this pin is pretty much flush with our bolt face there now. So theoretically, there's no reason why it shouldn't work anymore. All that's left is we just got to put these extractors back in. Alright, so these two extractors, the one with the sharper claw goes on the ejection side, and the one with the smoother claw goes on the opposite side. Make sure they fit into their little hole there. I should just clamp over top. Same thing on this side. Go. Clipped right back over. Alright, so there it's all back together. And realistically, there should be nothing left in the bolt that would be a malfunction with this guy. So I'm going to clean out the bore on this rifle, and we're going to stick it all back together, and I'm going to test fire it. Well, I'm not quite sure where I left off with this thing, but there is a few things we need to fix, and I think I figured out, well, there's one thing I need to fix, and I think I figured out what that thing to fix is. So I need to strip this thing back apart, and so again, we'll pop this guy back out. This pin just drifts out. This comes off, and then again, like I said, I'll stick this in the vise and pull it. So here we're gonna release that, release this, and then so this, I believe this is called a striker assembly. Here's what we got to fix. So this guy right here, this is the striker assembly, I believe, and this rifle, I believe, is from 1971. There's a horn stamp on here from 71, possibly 74. This is the old style striker assembly. And if we look at our firing pin, this is a new style firing pin. So the old styles don't have the spring, and then they also have a different end here that actually kind of latches over this and hooks onto there. Well, this guy is not set up to work with that. So I think what happened here was somebody probably had this rifle, probably broke a firing pin, ordered a new one. This is the new style firing pin, and didn't replace this and didn't modify this. So what's the fix for this? The fix is to lob this guy off right there and just have a flat pad on there. So I'm gonna go do that. Here's to hoping it works. I don't think you can even get the firing pin for this style anymore. But Anschutz says when you put this new firing pin in, you can modify this pin and cut it off. Cut that nipple off there. So let's go grind that guy down. Alright, and I'm just going to use a belt sander because this thing is actually quicker than trying to do it on a grinder. And I'm going to do the last little bit, probably by hand. Alright, and I'm not sure if these are hardened or not, but let's just put a file to it and see. Doesn't appear to be. So in doing this, I don't want to lose any of my length here. I want to try and, that's why I'm doing this final little bit by hand. I want to try and keep my length here. We're getting dang close there. Alright, so I think the last little bit here I'm going to file on a surface plate with some probably 320, 400 sandpaper. I think I'm actually just going to do it on my little anvil here on my vise. Should be close enough. We'll start with 120. You know what, that's actually cleaning up really well. I think I'm just gonna leave it at that, because there's a little divot right around the center of that there, so I don't want to take much more than that off, so we'll put that back in and give her a shot here, see, hopefully that does it. Alrighty, well, that seemed to have done the trick. So I took it out, and you can't see here, but two fired cases. They fired really well. They got nice hard pin strikes on them. So grinding that little nipple down is actually the fix for this. I believe what happened with this thing, I bought this thing as a gunsmith special, as I said. I've never dealt with these before. This is the first time I've ever messed with one. However, these, the new firing pin, somebody must have broken a fire pin, put a new one in there, and didn't realize that they had to modify that striker to make the new firing pin work. So one thing we can look is, if you kind of look closer here, this little gap right here between the cocking piece and the bolt, I'm going to fire it, it's empty of course. Before that would fall not even halfway, there's a gap right there. I'd still have about an 80 thousandths gap in there. And let me see what it is right now. We went from, and this is just a general, we went from 80 thousandths, so that's 235 thousandths right there. And so now when we pull the trigger, that falls completely on the back of the bolt. So we have 235 thousandths of striker fall there, versus before we only had 80 thousandths, because that striker was not functioning properly and not allowing that pin to go forward. Although we have a little less pin travel now as far as the actual pin firing forward, but it doesn't need to take up that whole, it was like 40, it was all the way forward before, it was 40 some thousandths. Now we're a little less than that, but it's still plenty enough to give us a hard strike on there. So that is actually the fix for this thing. It was somebody put the wrong, they put the right part in there, they just didn't do the entire job for it. So it literally took like 5 minutes to actually fix the thing, whereas I've spent about an hour, hour and a half trying to dink around doing everything else. I'm kind of excited to go out and test this thing and see how it actually shoots. I got to throw a scope on there. I think I'm just gonna, I got to see what I got for scopes here to throw on there just to test it out. I'll probably end up sending this down the road, but I'm kind of curious to see how it does before I do that. So there we go. It's another problem solved here.